All right, it's time for another film study. And Ken, I'm excited because this is an offense that's going to be fun to talk about today. How's it going?
Life's good, Josh. How about you?
It's going well. Um, this is a game. We're going to get into this game. We've got a great guest today, Jim Zipcode. How you doing?
Great, thanks. Good to be here.
All right, glad you're back. You've done some shorts with Ken. Now we get to get you in long form to kind of look at this game. And guys, this game, I don't know how you want to start there. It's big offensive movements, big defensive movements, a big turning point kind of for the season almost that we finally saw the Lamar Jackson Ravens come back in a game.
Yeah, I mean, just to set it up, the Ravens had a number of undercurrents in this game that were, certainly might have towed them under. They have the COVID scare during the week. They had people missing practice. They lost Campbell very early on. They're just coming off a loss of Stanley. They don't know how the offensive line is going to work. In fact, they're out without a total of 4 Pro Bowlers by the game's end, including Ingram, Campbell, Stanley, and who am I forgetting? Humphrey. So it's a game they certainly could have lost. And, could have fallen victim to that, but they turned it around the second half for the first time in the Jackson era. They came back from halftime. There've only been 7 games, by the way, Jim, that they've trailed entering the second half.
Right. That's the story, right? Like they can't win trailing in the second half, but fortunately they never trail in the second half. So it doesn't come up. They're good enough that the situation doesn't usually arise.
All right. But talking about turning points in this game, let's get to this first of all, because the interception was clearly a huge turning point in the game. Right after the fumble, which was the only way the Ravens were stopped at any point, we'll talk about that a little later, in the first 3 drives of the second half, immediately responded with the interception by Peters.
Has there ever been a more identifiable pivotal moment than that challenge that Harbs threw in the third quarter there?
Yeah, as challenges go, I think it's one of the great challenges of the Harbaugh era. And I put this in the article, so I'm not going to go through the entire thing real quickly, but I think there's 4 standards you have to meet to have a really great challenge. And the first is you have to win it. And there have been 48 of those. The second is it has to be pivotal in the game. No doubt about that in this case. The third one, if you can get it, this doesn't apply to every game, is that it has to have playoff implications. This game did. And the fourth is, and this is a special case in this case, is I think it took a special understanding of the rules by Harbs and the Ravens staff that made it be a challenge that he might have made where a lot of other coaches wouldn't have.
I think that's exactly right. And I think like a lot of fans, I saw us go to commercial with that challenge and I thought there's no way. Probably the only reason he threw that flag was because Wink Martindale wanted a timeout for the defense, and they're like, what the heck, let's throw a flag. Maybe something will come of it, but regardless, we'll get the timeout. But Harbs, I didn't realize this, but if you go back to 2018, Harbs and the Ravens kind of submitted a new catch standard to the competition committee regarding like a third step and making a football move as an attempt to kind of go away from the previous, sort of nonsense, the Des Bryant nonsense that we had around the old catch rule. And so Harbs and the Ravens really had kind of a deeper understanding of the mechanism of this rule than maybe most coaching staffs would have.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. I hadn't heard it before. We talked about this in the production meeting just briefly, but it makes complete sense that would have been an extra advantage towards this particular play. It did look to me like there were 4, back and forth, left, right that Peters used. And I don't know about you, but I kind of think of that as being 3 steps. Some might only say that's 2, but that it's kind of like you step 1 foot, then the other foot, then the other foot, but you have to have your first foot on the ground before you can make the first step.
Right. And so what they said when they submitted this a couple years ago, and so I'm reading an article on Ravens.com, and they're talking about how Matt Weiss kind of reviewed a bunch of catches, and they came up with a standard, which was like, number 1, control the football, number 2, 2 feet or a body part in bounds, and then number 3, a football move, like a third step, or extending the football to get to the goal line, or tucking the football, just any kind of move. And you did see, Peters took a third step, even a fourth step, while shoving against that receiver. And I think, I'm still struggling with this. Like, it's not that I necessarily think he caught it, but I think that Harbs articulated the challenge in a framework that that was the rule book, that it is what the refs would respond to.
Well, it's good that Harbs's contribution to this competition committee or whatever, however they made this contribution, was done in a manner to clarify additional components of the additional football move, because that's where it's always
Yeah,
lost on me is what the hell does an additional football move mean? You
right.
got to be much more clear. I know what a step is, and I think
Yeah.
I can define that. But anyway, great. That was a great play for the defense. Let's get back to the offense here for a minute and talk through that. You good to
Were
go on?
you worried? I just wanted to ask you, so Gus fumbled right on the goal line after just a tremendous drive down there. And even though he fumbled, as a fan, I remember thinking, all right, that's bad, but the Ravens offense is back. We've proven we can move. We can still win this game. So kind of even before the interception, I was a little, I want to put interception in scare quotes, right? But even before that, I was a little more relaxed than I had been after the end of the first half.
It was a fantastic drive that they had to get down to the 3-yard line to start that third quarter, and they never got to third down on that drive.
Yeah.
They were all first and seconds. They had 5 first downs on the drive, so it was a very dominant movement forward, and it looked like a different offense at that point. I'm still always concerned when there's a turnover and you're down.
Sure.
So I didn't like that, but starting from the field position they were in, they can recover from it, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried about it.
Yeah, I was less worried, I guess, is what I want to say. I was less worried after that handing of the possession to the opponent than I was going into the quarter, if that makes any sense.
All right. How about we talk some offensive line here?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so the Ravens had, I always like to bring in the aggregate scoring of the line. Just reach over and grab my materials here because...
All right. Well, Ken, while you grab those materials,
Okay.
let me jump in with my bookie because they're back at Filmstudy. We had a great run with them the past couple of weeks. They're back for the rest of the football season, so it's time for you to get on board and use that code RAVENS. You heard me talk about it all last week and the week before. If you jumped on with the Joe Flacco number of yards passed last night, you would have made a bunch of money, because it was great odds, but I did not jump on that because who knew Joe Flacco was going to look like the old Joe Flacco. And so don't forget that you can bet on the underdogs like that. They've got a ton of values. And the thing about the NFL is that the underdogs are never really dogs on Sunday because every team has a chance to win, and you do too, and you can make your money move even further with those underdogs. So sign on up at mybookie.ag, and when you do, use the promo code RAVENS to claim a deposit match, dollar for dollar, all the way up to $1,000. If you put in $200, they'll give you $200 free to gamble with. So going over to MyBookie, use the code RAVENS to help out Filmstudy and make yourself some money.
Yeah, that's a marvelous kind of a match bet. We used to go play a lot of blackjack in the old days in Las Vegas and other places in the world, but in Las Vegas in particular, they compete for your business with a lot of these coupons. Never seen anything as juicy as $1,000 match play deal, which effectively they're giving. So it's a nice opportunity for people if you bet a little bit of money or if you bet a lot of money to get some free money out of the deal. All right, let's move on. Offensive line scoring. Let's talk about the overall first. There were 63 scored snaps in the game. 2 of them were spikes, so those don't get counted. The Ravens did have 2 penalties in the game. They had an offensive hold. They had another illegal formation penalty. The good news, they both came on the same play. So it really, only one of them was going to be accepted. Both of them are charged in terms of the charge to the individual linemen. We'll get to that in a moment. They had only 1/3 of the 2 total sacks were charged to the offensive line, so that was good. There were no other QHs in the game, no other quarterback hits, so two from the sacks only, and there were 2 pressures allowed only for the entire game by the offensive line. Now that doesn't mean that Jackson didn't have some pressure or didn't deliver the ball quickly on occasion, but there were only 2 pressures the whole game by the offensive line allowed.
That's interesting because watching it, I thought Lamar was under a little bit more duress than that.
Yeah, I think that's accurate, but he was also releasing the ball quickly. So he had ample time and space, which means a 3-second pocket, it's ample. It's more than you can expect now on half of the plays. There was a time when it was almost half, but 8 out of 25 times he had ample time and space. That's okay for today's game, 32%, but it's not unusually high. Let's put it that way. It was aided by the fact that the Colts rushed 4 on 18 of the passes and only rushed 5 on 7, and they never rushed more than that. So they played a very limited scheme, much in fact like the Ravens did on the other side. In fact, the Ravens frankly ran a lot more scheme than the Colts did, even though they ran a little bit less in terms of numbers in this game.
Did you record them for any deceptive pressures? I thought I saw a couple places where one guy dropped out and somebody on the other side rushed.
Okay, so they didn't have anything but a one-man zone blitz in this game. So all they had were these 4-1s occasionally and a 5-1 here and there. So when they had a 5-1, they probably blitzed 2 and dropped 1, and those would have been the deceptives. Mm-hmm. So I see 1, 2, just 2 of those. So it's definitely not a lot of deception. They did some stunting and twisting on the line. I wouldn't say they really did a lot of that either. I mean, all teams are kind of cognizant of having controlled rush lanes still against Lamar. So that's part of what they really need to do. And it takes away a lot of the scheme elements of the pass rush other than blitzing itself. And there wasn't that much blitzing. Okay, run blocking. A little bit less effective in this game than the pass blocking. In fact, a lot less effective. But the run blocking gave up 4 total penetrations by the offensive line, which is a hell of a lot for one game. In fact, I think the Colts had 7 tackles for losses in the game, but most of those, 5 of them, I believe, were on run plays. And those were some of the really bad plays, including the forced fumble on Edwards, which was given up by McCary, getting beaten inside by DeForest Buckner. All right, we'll talk about some individual players. Brown. He's a great story since he's moved over there. He's now played 121 snaps that I've scored. So he had 58 in the last game, 63 in this game. And he has not allowed a negative pass rush event yet, with the exception of the holding call in this game.
That's astonishing.
It is astonishing. It's absolutely remarkable.
I was a little terrified. I thought that he might be too slow-footed to play on that side, but he uses his size and his reach just really intelligently.
Yeah, he's very good at that. And, there's even a play that I really noticed when not on the broadcast angle, but when I looked at the all-22, where he's lined up in a very wide stance from the other lineman. So he's out of line, but he's clearly having to position himself way over to cover a guy who's in an extreme wide 9 stance. I don't even know who the pass rusher is on that play. But, Jim, if you looked at the all-22, you could probably pick the play out. Anyway, that specific...
I think I know what so a lot of linemen try to get an advantage going backward faster or setting up kind of with an exaggerated like back leg. And he's stealing that distance in this play you're talking about. He's stealing that horizontally rather than vertically.
Yeah. So there's 2 ways that linemen cheat. One is they get vertical, and they sometimes get an illegal formation call because they're upright and their head doesn't break the waist of the center. And the other way they do it is they line up too far back, and especially with 1 foot back and the other forward, and then they also don't make it to the center. But anyway, in this case, you're exactly right. It's a horizontal instead of a vertical cheating that he's doing. And it could have backfired on him, because if the guy all of a sudden moves in tight, he can't move. And it could allow that gap to be exposed. But,
or, a stunter could come inside of him or something like that. Like, it could go wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very. There were options certainly where that could have happened, but he did a very good job in terms of pushing his guy south of the pocket and using his length well, like I call it, at tackle, as opposed to being able to get in front of the guy. Stanley is extremely efficient because he's got those great feet to stay between himself and Lamar, which creates a lot of lesser pressures. Like, he doesn't give up a lot of quarterback hits and sacks because he backs into the quarterback. He gives ground to maintain his position relative to that pass rusher. Brown, he's much more of I got to use my length to push a guy south of the pocket.
Right. Right. So there's chances, I guess, for the guy to come back, right, to rebound off of that. But that's going to take a second, and that's what we're looking for is time.
Yeah, there you go. B for Brown, in terms of the grading on this game, I could not be more thrilled at how he's played through 2 games here, and we'll see if he can keep it up against some of these other teams, Pittsburgh in particular, when they get another chance at them. All right, Bozeman. A fairly solid game as I scored it. I thought of the run blockers, he probably looked the best. 7 missed blocks in the game. He made 9 of 11 pulls. He did allow a penetration. That wasn't good. He definitely had problems with DeForest Buckner, and he looked awkward versus him. on multiple plays. But a lot of the problems were honestly, in terms of the poles getting blown up, were Skura and McCary getting backed up into the backfield, which actually I think blew up. It might have been both of his poles, but it certainly was at least one.
Yeah, and in the passing game, I saw also Skura got kind of blown up and flushed Lamar to the right on at least one play.
Yeah, definitely. We're not seeing that anchor. B for Bozeman. Let's go to Skura. He's just okay in this game. He didn't have a spectacular game. 1 penetration, a team high 9 missed blocks. Had a lot of problems with both Buckner and Grover Stewart, who's a excellent interior defensive tackle for the Colts. He had a lot of issues, obviously, with shotgun snaps in this game, and they spent a lot of time on that on the broadcast and showing his finger. If the Ravens are going to keep Skura at center for the next game, they need to find a device to go with that, a crutch or whatever, except for his hand, that will allow him to make an accurate shotgun snap. It's a funny thing. 2 years ago in camp, before the 2019 season, McCary got a disproportionate number of the shotgun snaps in 7-on-7 drills. And the idea was they were going to groom him to be the backup center, and they thought Skura is in a good place. But I think if I had to guess right now, I think McCary is probably in a better place watching the end of last season in terms of accurate shotgun snaps than Skura is right now. And it wouldn't be even out of the question that you might have those two either switch positions or just sit Skura for McCary.
Has Skura had problems with accurate snapping in the past?
Yes, he's had some even when he wasn't hurt. And the way I find out about it is not always from watching it in game. This game, it was real obvious in terms of the balls dribbling on the ground, being way low, high and outside. It's like the Wild Thing is in there. But what really has shown up in the past is PFF will often have a big difference in Skura's scoring from me. And then I asked them about it, and they said, "Well, did you get him for these bad shotgun snaps?" And I didn't. I don't generally score that. In this game, I took away his subjective adjustment for doing it and still left him with a C in terms of the grade.
Because I thought that the hand was sort of a one-time thing. If he's smearing the ball with blood every time he grabs it, that's not something that happens every game. So I didn't realize that he was kind of a problem, a chronic problem.
Yeah, I think the injury is the first time it's been ascribed to an injury is this time. But I think other times he's had problems with the shotgun snap. But anyway, if you think about how it happens sometimes to pitchers when they split a fingernail on their pitching hand or get a cut on their head, it can take a long time for that stuff to heal. Yeah. I still can remember Greg Olson always constantly wiping off and having a lot of blood on his uniform at the end of some of his games in the late 80s, early 90s.
Otter. People don't bring up Otter enough on football podcasts.
Not enough. All right, let's move forward here. McCary, he had some problems with both with Grover Stewart and with Buckner. He allowed that big penetration for the forced fumble on Edwards. He allowed a pressure, a third of a sack. So he had a couple of pass blocking errors. He did make 4 out of 5 pulls, and it's nice to see that they can make pulls in both directions. It's always nice to have a ambidextrous running game, as I would call it. C- for him for the game. He was probably he's definitely the weakest grade of the Ravens linemen. I think subjectively, just looking at his game, he probably was the worst of the Ravens linemen as I saw it.
So these grades for Skura and McCary, they're C's and C-. If you had told me going into this weekend that those guys would get C's against DeForest Buckner, I would have applauded because I thought Buckner was going to just wreck this line.
And he kind of did, but they both also get a subjective adjustment that's pretty large for facing Buckner on a fair number of snaps. So they both have benefited from that in the scoring I gave them.
Yeah.
So Skura, in fact, did not. Skura got a C without it because he lost his for the inaccurate shotgun snaps. But anyway, I agree with you. And, if I had a young lineman, if I had a rookie lineman who's consistently getting a C-, but otherwise shows flashes of improvement, I think that's a good thing. That's where Skura was as a rookie.
Yeah.
And he's turned out to be a pretty good player. And it's where Bozeman really was for the early part of last year. And he's turned into a much better lineman. So I think you got to be reasonable in terms of your expectations of a rookie lineman. And the Ravens are working like hell right now to try and get that right guard position given to a younger player.
Why isn't Powers getting an opportunity there?
I don't have the answer to that, but I'm getting a little bit of feedback here, Josh. I'm not sure what the reason is. But anyway, I'm not sure of the reason, but I think that opportunity may yet come. McCary just, I don't think, played himself out of the role in this particular game with how he played.
So the thing that bugs me about Macari, like, I think that he's a smart player and he makes the right reads and he knows where he's supposed to go. And certainly he pulls well. He's nice and mobile, but he cannot anchor. And we play big, active defensive lines.
Right. I like his physicality. I think part of the issue with his anchoring is not necessarily the anchor itself. It's the arm length. It's the problem that he gets shed by these longer arm guys much more easily. And a player like Buckner made him look bad a couple times in this game in terms of that. But other players, like Cox and others are capable of doing the same sort of thing to him. Your typical long-armed 3-tech is going to be the nightmare player for McCary to face, because he has to face him one-on-one almost every single block that they're aligned in that direction. So it's the hardest. Anyways, the hardest opponent for him to face.
Well, that's not going away. That's our opponents.
That's true, but the options around the line are limited, to say the least. Colon, Castillo, and Bredesen have even shorter arms than McCary, and it's hard to believe, but they're both very short-armed. Skura is in the middle, and Powers is in the middle between his normal guard length arms in the 33-inch range. But these guys all are dealing with some short armness and the difficulties that go with that. And unfortunately, it does show up with McCary. I wouldn't judge him for it if he was like Marshall Yanda and able to overcome being slightly short armed. In the case of McCary, he's just, a lot of his missed blocks are sheds on my notes.
I mean, there's a lot of things we wouldn't blame him for if he were like
Yes.
All
right, let's keep going here. Fluker played well at the right tackle for the second straight game. No pass blocking charges, just amazing to me this week. He did have a few last week, but still scored well, still had an A last week. Very limited mobility is showing up for Fluker in terms of getting to level 2. Like, it's really a lot worse than Brown. Brown had a more of an ability to down block, move up a half level, hit the scraping linebacker. What I'm finding is Fluker's highlight blocks tend to be 2 blocks on linemen, including the lineman he faces initially for the down block and another lineman who tries to pursue the play, as opposed to getting up and really cutting off that scraping linebacker who's following the play, which would be the preferable block. You have a better chance to catch additional players in the wash with that sort of block.
So he's not getting to that 1.5 level where the scrape exchange is occurring or whatever.
Exactly. I mean, it's where that linebacker is pursuing across the line of scrimmage. He's not able to move up the half level to get there.
Yeah.
All right, Powers, 4 to 5 blocks as a 6th offensive lineman. He did allow a quarter of a penetration. By the way, part of what's making this transition difficult is that Powers is not really lighting the world on fire either in terms of his plays. He's made some mistakes. He had a holding penalty a couple of weeks ago. He had this quarter of a penetration in this game, which was, obviously he did something wrong, but he also had a problem with the guy next to him, and there was penetration on the opposite side. It's just a variety of things are making this decision not easy, and they're with 3 young players that I think they're really just having a hard time making the choice of who they want it to be.
That holding penalty was bogus. You know that.
Yeah. I kind of intimated that at the time, didn't I?
Yes.
All right. So anyway, pretty good game for the offensive line when you get 3 Bs, a C, and a C minus. You can live with that every single week of a season if you did. And as the Ravens' grades have not been bad this year, but they haven't been exceptional. And if you look at their pass block and run block win rates, they're both above average. There aren't too many NFL teams that can claim that, only about 7 or 8. And the Ravens maybe have about the 5th or 6th best offensive line when you look at where they are on the efficient frontier of successful pass block and run block win rates.
That is interesting, and that's not what the eye test shows. And I wonder if that's the difference between kind of smart technical play by O linemen who are putting their bodies where they're supposed to be, but not dominant guys who are, getting tremendous push or moving people off the line or dominating people.
Yeah, the Ravens do not have that guy who's a real earth mover. If they wanted him, they needed to have drafted Michael Oweno. That was the guy who could have given them that kind of a push. By the way, he's playing great for the Patriots. We're going in there, and it's just going to be another draft pick, knife twisting situation for me that they chose Bredesen over Oweno.
Isn't he like 370 pounds?
He's about, I think, 348, maybe something like that at the combine. Might have been 345, but definitely carries that weight very well. I mean, he's got a grown man body. He doesn't have a pudgy teenager body that you sometimes see in these rookies who are just coming out of a even a place like Michigan. But there are three offensive linemen at Michigan last year. Bredesen, a real short arm guy at the opposite side, very intelligent, supposedly very technical. We haven't yet really seen him on the field except as a sixth offensive lineman. There was Ruiz, the guy everybody was in love with in the first round as the center. And then there's Ueno, who I really liked as a more massive earth-moving guard, because I think you need to have one of those, and he had good length as well. That would have been the guy. And now the Patriots got him at number 182, and they get to have him play tackle. So really weird kind of a situation here.
I didn't realize he was playing tackle. I thought he was playing guard.
Okay, some things are closing down for me here, but we'll have to keep moving here. I need a second here to bring back up my my schedule here. So before we get into the rest of the stuff, let's talk about Lamar Jackson a little bit here. And why don't you make any point you'd like to about Lamar in terms of what you saw in this game? Because I don't want to dominate kind of the setup for this.
Oh my God, is there anything else to say? In the second half, Lamar looked like Lamar. We saw what looked like 2019 Lamar for the first time, right? Or maybe the first time since game one.
Yeah, I mean, he was certainly exceptional. Game one, he was unbelievable. That was Lamar running around the pocket and making plays despite pressure. That's kind of the ultimate Lamar.
Yeah.
But the Lamar this week, I thought was really terrific. He played very well, and he in the second half went to a bunch of first read throws, which I think was really a lot of the planning change. So he was out of shotgun, obviously, the whole time. He's always out of shotgun. The normal idea with Lamar is look to a first read, but you can have staggered reads where you then have the opportunity to create an extended play. Okay, so read one, then read two are timed up so that your second read may be able to give you a better play. And Lamar's been accused of passing up the first read too many times, but also that's also the power of Lamar, that you get him rolling around and then he can make a play on an extended play that would be really nice. Well, for whatever reason, they told him, and they maybe scripted the plays a little different in the second half to make it be more easy first read, slants. The throw to the outside, and Boykin, I think, really falls into that category, but opportunities for him to make and take his first read.
Yeah. So to me, the difference between the first half and the second half was so striking that you kind of want to dive into it and come up with an explanation, right? And so I saw two things really between half one and half two. And one of them was Lamar and one of them was play calling. And I think with Lamar, and this I think ties in with what you were just saying, he seemed really decisive in the second half. He hit the top of his drop and he threw it, or he got flush and he rolled. But, sometimes he gets flushed and he rolls out of the pocket and he rolls all the way to the numbers without having decided what to do. He rolled like maybe 5 or 6 steps and threw it when he was still in the between the numbers. He didn't wait around. He didn't look for something better. He just took what was there, just step and rip. So he was extremely decisive in all of the pass plays in Q3. So that was him. And then in the play calling, if you look at Lamar's first 7 passes of the game, so this is half one. If we count Hollywood's bobble on the sideline, if we count that as an 8-yard target, and that was on a play, I think it was 7 yards to go, and he was maybe a yard behind the market, beyond the marker. So Lamar's first 7 passes in the first half, they were a median depth of about 5 yards, or a median gain of about 5 yards. So they were very close to the line of scrimmage. Well, Indy is flooding. They got their 4 pass rushers. They've got this cloud of linebackers buzzing, and they're charging, anything that looks like a running play, anything with Lamar moving to the side, any handoffs. In the second half, Lamar's 9 pass attempts in Q3, the median gain was 12 yards. Now, some of that was after the catch.
Yeah.
But a lot of it was depth of target. So we've got him doing a play fake and then throwing it deeper. So he's drawing that second level, those buzzing fast linebackers, and he's throwing it past them. So with him being decisive and then the play action and the slightly deeper depth of target, I think you just see these ripping off these medium chunk plays, like just play after play after play.
Yeah, it was great to see. There were a lot of 9, 10, 11-yard throws in there. And, I don't know about you, but as a football fan, I always say 9's better than 10 on first down.
Yes, you get the deep shot. Yes.
But anyway, there's that. And then the fact that the setup in terms of down and distance was remarkably efficient in the second half. Now, let me just go through a few statistics here to kind of set this up. They had a 32-4 streak of plays to begin Q3. So they got the football after having the Colts have the football at the end of the half on some ridiculousness in terms of failed clock management, frankly, having Dobbins run out of bounds, gave the football back to the Colts for an extra chance. But the 32-4 play streak, they had a 15-0 edge in first downs. They reached third down only 4 times. Of those, 3 of them were 3rd and 1. They made all 3 of those. The 4th was 3rd and 4, and they converted that on 2 plays with a 4th and 3. Eventually, the run to the right by Dobbins converting it. So the only negative play they had during that whole time was the fumble. It was a huge negative, but it was the only negative play they had during that 32 play stretch where they didn't really accomplish what they needed to accomplish.
They threw it on first down. They play faked, even to air with the running back going to the wrong side. The defense still bit on it. And they did not, of their handoffs in Q3, not only one of them was on 1st and 10. The rest of them were all 2nd and 1, 1st and goal from the 3, 3rd and 1, 1st and goal from the 2, 2nd and goal from the 2, from the 1, 3rd and goal from the 1, 4th and 3. They had no handoffs in long situations or 1st and 10 except one. All of their running plays, they kept at the run, they kept using it, but it was all from advantageous downs.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And it was a bad game for running the football. I think they realized that they were having a lot of problems with the Colts front and with Darius Leonard, being the other linebacker, 58. Okafor, that's not exactly right, is it? Anyway, his 58 was very effective, I thought, as well, when I looked at the film, in terms of getting into the backfield on some of these shorter plays and figuring out what was going on with Lamar in the backfield as well. I can't say enough positive about the change of tactic in the second half.
Yep.
And we kind of hit on it earlier, but I love the difference in the type of pass they're throwing. As soon as I saw the throw to the outside to Boykin, I said, give me 5 more like that. 11-yard throw. That's exactly what the play is supposed to do. It was even exaggerated in terms of Boykin, creating too much space off the defender. Well, if that's what it takes to get trust, give me that. Let's get some more of that. He doesn't need that much. He just needs to trust Boykin to turn properly to get that back shoulder throw. But in that case, the defensive back gave him about 5 yards. I don't think he could have passed it up.
Right. So Miles caught it 5 yards air, and then maybe 6 yards after the catch, plowing into the 2 defenders.
That sounds about right.
I had that as one of my little random notes for the end, that Boykin got a sniff of the air outside the doghouse briefly.
Hopefully that's good for him. All right. It's kind of a different version as I look at the second half of that 2019 offense, because the 2019 offense could do whatever it wanted on the ground, and that opened up all sorts of opportunities through the air. This was more almost just like the opposite. Give Lamar easy first read throws. Lamar's accuracy was as good as it's ever been. Obviously, in that second half, he completed his last 12 passes, right, I think?
Mm-hmm. He was 10 for 10 in the second half.
But last 12 for the game, did I have it right? Going back to the first, it doesn't matter.
I didn't go back.
10 for 10 in the second half is fine. So anyway, he was on the money, and he if you had a quarterback there who went 7 for 10, they wouldn't have been nearly as effective in terms of the drives, because they would have gotten sputtered out at some point with not making every easy throw the way he needed. So it really took top accuracy from Lamar, but he delivered on it, and it was just a very effective version of the offense.
You had some stats, I think, for this section of the game, some metrics.
Oh, I meant to get the NFL, the AWS stats, the next gen stats, but I couldn't get them available to myself today. And I don't know if anybody else is having some significant problems with this. Send me a note on Twitter on how to beat it. But whenever I go there and I try to go to the passing stats, sometimes it comes up and sometimes it doesn't. And I can't figure out exactly what's wrong with it. But I tried about 3 or 4 times today, and I don't know whether it's a use thing or whatever. But the one thing I did know about this game is Lamar only had the 4th shortest average completed air yards, but Rivers had the shortest at 2.4 yards, and Lamar was only about 3.9 yards for this week, if I recall correctly. And he also had a significantly shorter time to throw than he's had for the whole season. So he's been in around 2.9 something seconds. He dropped under 3, but in this game, it was more like in the 2.5 to 6 or 7 range. It was significantly shorter than where he had been so far this year.
I think that chimes in with the decisiveness theme. So I've been looking at some of the unsuccessful pass plays from previous games. I wasn't able to face the Steelers game, but I looked at Washington, Cincinnati, and Philly, and every once in a while you see, more than every once in a while, you see kind of indecisiveness where there is a guy to hit, but Lamar seems to maybe want something more or waiting for a deeper play to develop and kind of getting himself into trouble because he's not ready to pull the trigger on the short gain. And that's not what we saw in the second half. His back foot hit the ground and he threw that sucker.
Yeah, the extended play thing for Lamar, it's a difficult quandary to do because it's a lot of his value, and that's a lot of the value of a lot of the mobile quarterbacks today is they really make you pay on these 3-second plus run around plays. And they often could be 4 or 5 seconds, frankly, on the ones that are very successful in the extension. So I don't want to completely take that away from Lamar, but I want to have the switch where you can turn it on and off, maybe by a play at the play level to say, yeah, I'm going for a fast read now, or on this play, I'm just going to decide if I see if I see what I want in terms of a 4-man pass rush, I'm going to take my time and allow this play to develop and go for a secondary read if I think that's an opportunity.
I think with this reconfigured offensive line, and certainly with this opponent with DeForest Buckner over there, I think that getting rid of it fast is strategically justified.
Yeah, I agree. It seemed to make sense in a lot of ways here, and we've seen Flacco. Obviously not at all the same kind of quarterback, but when faced with a good 4-man pass rush, with the Colts kind of presented yesterday, despite the fact they only got 2 sacks, they can get some pressure with 4 men and without rushing excessively. And having 7 men in coverage just presents all sorts of difficulty and interception risk, and you don't want to really expose Lamar to that. And the fast reads will reduce that chance because it doesn't give people a chance to close windows by moving horizontally across the field.
And then his mobility comes in when the coverage is so great. When they've dropped everybody back and he can't find anybody, he picks up a quick 5, 7, 8 yards. He keeps the chains moving. That, I think, makes the offense unstoppably efficient.
Yeah, they did a good job with that. They've been doing much more runs up the middle with Lamar this year. And Jim, I don't think we've had a chance to talk about this, but that's been one of the things I'm not really so keen on. I understand they want to use the speed to get Dobbins to the edge, and that Lamar can get some big runs up the middle. And he had a big touchdown run. Actually, I think he had a couple, a 20 and a 37 or something, or earlier this year. No, it's 20 and a 50. But anyway, all that also exposes Lamar to some of the bigger hits. And we saw one in this game when Blackman went to his helmet.
Yeah, so I understand it and I don't love it. So the theory is when the defense is doing that scrape exchange, where the guy up on the line dives for the running back and then the linebacker scrapes around to pick out the outside guy. If the running back is the outside guy and the defensive end jumps on him, then that opens the middle. So you switch the responsibilities, right? The running back's not going up the middle now. The running back's going wide, and you're enticing the D end to jump him. So that's the theory. And it works sometimes, but I'm not in love with seeing, Lamar challenge, Tuitt or Hayward or Geno Atkins or anybody. I don't, it's a trade-off, definitely.
Yeah, they have a couple of different ways they can attack that. One is they can run it as an option, or they can otherwise just run it as a pitch play, which the Ravens don't do a lot of. They don't really run pitch plays very much at all. They have run the option maybe about 4 times in the last 4 weeks, something like that, where they've had a pitch off an option, but it's not something.
You're talking about that speed option.
Yeah, where they have a player to the outside of Lamar, whether it's Dobbins or even Edwards, that can receive a pitch. So it's an option. So, but it's not a standard pistol read option. It's an outside option.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of things where you can combat the scrape exchange to a degree, is get another guy to the outside. The other way to beat the scrape exchange is mislead the opponent with the counter and make him, show him pulling in the opposite direction and then run against that,
Right.
run the opposite way. And you're depending on Lamar to beat one guy or to get out into space and make good plays. Anyway, I think we've probably talked about this topic enough. I kind of want to move on, but very happy with the second half, and I'm very hopeful. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it too, about Lamar going forward for the rest of the season.
Well, I think that we, as just a pure fan, I think that if this Ravens team goes on to accomplish anything, that this second half in Indy, we could look back at this as the turning point of the season. Maybe the most important half in football this team has played so far.
Yeah, I agree in a lot of ways. Obviously, all of the undercurrents that went with this game were very significant. And being behind and coming back against a good team on the road, missing players, all that.
Yep.
This was a great test. And I'm not a player. I'm not a fan or an analyst who likes manufactured tests. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not going to judge a quarterback by the number of fourth quarter comebacks he had if he's the one who created the opportunity for those fourth quarter comebacks with his lousy play early in the game. Lamar has been a guy who's won games in the first half. I'm perfectly happy with that formula. But in a difficult situation like this, I'm also happy to see this result. And I have to say, of course, that both Lamar and probably Greg Roman as well share some of the responsibility for getting behind in that first half.
Mina Kimes on Twitter pointed out that this was a nice narrative-killing win for Lamar and the Ravens, which I thought was a nice point.
Yeah, I think that's true. It was the first time in the Jackson era they've come from behind, with a halftime deficit, and it came the week after the first time they ever lost a game with a halftime lead.
Right.
So they're instead of 24-0 and 6-0 or 0-6, whatever they were, now they're 24-1 and 1-6. So anyway, the wins coming any way they are is good, and Lamar's certainly been a very successful quarterback by that measure, at a minimum.
Did you see that stat about, 31 straight games now with 20 points?
Yeah, that's remarkable.
I was looking at the other teams on that list, and these are Hall of Fame teams that we're on that list with. This is Dan Marino and Mark Duper and Clayton's Dolphins, the Greatest Show on Turf Rams, Peyton Manning's Broncos, record-setting Broncos, and the Ravens on top of that list. That's crazy.
Yeah, the points per drive numbers for the Ravens were at historic levels last year, but it's really amazing to me that they've been able to maintain it, because they still have very few drives per game, not as many points per drive, and any amount of variation, in their points from game to game would seem to doom that sort of a streak. And yet they score every single half. They've done that now for 105 straight halves or something.
Okay, if I knock on wood when you say that.
I'm jinxing it. We've already been talking about it for a while, so I'm sure we've jinxed it. Anyway, let's move on here.
Yeah.
Any other scheme things you want to talk about? Let me see if there's anything we haven't really hit on so far. Before we get started, if growing an e-commerce business is your focus, you'll need a platform that's focused on growth. That's where Klaviyo comes in. Klaviyo is the ultimate e-commerce marketing platform for online brands of all kinds and all sizes. Whether you're just getting started or running a well-known brand, it gives you everything you need to send memorable branded emails, text messages, and more, so you can build strong relationships that keep your customers coming back. With flexible automations, powerful insights, and super precise targeting, Klaviyo is a faster way to turn great ideas into great customer experiences. That's why it's trusted by more than 40,000 brands like Living Proof, Huckberry, and 8 Sleep. In fact, on average, Klaviyo customers see a 41% increase in overall revenue within 5 months. Klaviyo scales with you, so you never have to switch. They support everything from garage startups to iconic billion-dollar brands. Want to learn more about how you can grow your brand with Klaviyo? Visit klaviyo.com/grow to get started with a free trial today. That's klaviyo.com/grow. I think the play of Duvernay going up to 41% of snaps with Boykin at 38 is kind of a move of significance. It did happen last week as well. Duvernay had a few more, but this kind of confirms their relative equality in terms of time on the field.
Can I just tell you, I do not think that is reflected in their quality of play.
Go ahead.
Well, so I have a couple of odds and ends for like later in the show, like pass catching MVPs and whatnot, and the random sighting of Boykin being let out of the doghouse. I also had a pass catching demerit for this game, and it went to Duvernay.
Mm-hmm.
There were 2 plays where he was open and Lamar looked for him, but Duvernay did not turn his head to look for the ball or look at Lamar, and so Lamar held it and went somewhere else. One of them was that big sack in Q2. Sort of a jailbreak sack. I think Lamar lost something like 13 yards.
Yep.
If you look at that from the end zone view, that's Duvernay crossing, a shallow crosser right in front of the line, and Lamar's looking right at him, but Duvernay's just chugging, like just looking at the direction that he's running, and just keeps crossing and never looks for the ball. And there was a similar play later on. Not a sack, but a similar, he's just got his head down, chugging, running his route, and not looking for the ball. That one was a good result because the ball went to Marquise for a big gain. But there's a narrative around Duvernay and Boykin. I see this on the message board a lot, where Boykin has proven that he sucks and we should get rid of him,
Mm-hmm.
and Duvernay has looked super promising and he should get all the reps. And that narrative does not match what I see when I look at those guys on the tape. I like Duvernay, by the way, but that narrative is way overstated.
That's really good to hear. And by the way, I trust your judgment on this sort of thing more than just about anybody, Jim. I got to tell you,
Wow.
I mean it. The sort of things you're noticing are exactly the sort of things that I would think were important if I could notice them or if I did notice them. Not turning for the football. You really have to have a special trust relationship or a scripting to the play for the guy not to turn for the football and be willing to still throw it. So you either got to completely know when he's going to turn, you got to know how the play is written up. But on most plays, particularly if it's a second read, and obviously Lamar was under duress on the sack that you mentioned. That's a time where he has to be given a signal by that receiver. The receiver understands what Lamar is going to do, and turning his head would have been one of them.
Yep. So Andrews has proven that he's on the same page. He knows what Lamar needs to be thinking at least most of the time, and Duvernay's got a way to go.
Boykin as a blocker is something, I've already heard from one guest that he never wanted to hear about it again. But it's something that it keeps showing up every game. He makes a great block or two. Anyway, I can't put it aside.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but yeah, I feel like Miles Boykin plays a position in the Ravens offense that does not exist in other teams' offenses. I feel like Greg Roman has, how there's a blocking tight end and a move tight end.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Greg Roman has a blocking wide receiver who occasionally catches passes, and Boykin is playing the hell out of that position.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I really do like it, and I think the Ravens value it. But then I see this reduction in Boykin snaps, and I kind of wonder. So I'd have to look back, and I know who to ask about this. I have to ask Josh about this, but the 41-38 division on the snaps. I wonder if that was a case where Duvernay is getting more obvious passing snaps and Boykin's getting more obvious or possible run snaps. Still,
Matt Waldman pointed out, he's a draft evaluator guy. He pointed out Duvernay pre-draft as kind of a gadget sort of player, kind of a hybrid maybe of maybe James White of the Patriots or
Percy Harvin.
Like, yeah. So he's somebody who could get a lot of snaps in an irregular role as a gadget guy. So some of that might be that. I know that he got an end around in one game. There's things that you would use him for that you would not use Boykin for.
Right. I agree. And, he was obviously a very successful slot player in his last year in college, but I think he played some outside earlier on. But you're right. I mean, at the NFL level, it's an open season on what you might add to the offense. If that's jet sweep, it's jet sweep. If it's some sort of orbit motion where you're using your own gravitational pull on the defense to change somebody else's position, that might be it. They've used him on these wide receiver screens where they can really make use of who Boykin is if he's in the slot on the same side as Boykin to try and get one good block set up.
Yep.
Another interesting thing I saw out of this game was that Marquise Brown seemed to draw Xavier Rhodes on most of the snaps that he was in on the game. Did you find that from your own charting?
I haven't broken down this game yet, actually. I was just doing a quick look at the successful and unsuccessful plays to prep for this.
Okay, so anyway, Marquise Brown was held again kind of in check in this game. I didn't feel it was much of a scheme thing or as much as it was Xavier Rhodes really kind of did a very good job to neutralize him. And, I guess it's not unexpected that you'd get their best corner on Marquise Brown. And we probably have seen that, in a number of weeks. But this game, it kind of really stood out to me in terms of him being shut down. He might have had 3 catches, but he didn't have a good yards per target game. As I recall, it was something like 5 for 25 or something.
He did not. There were really only 3 guys who had good yards per target games.
Yeah.
Nick Boyle would be the pass catching MVP of this game. He had 4 catches on 4 targets for 46 yards. That's 11.5 YPT. And he looked great. He looked more mobile and athletic than I remember seeing him. In my notes, I say he looked kind of like Hurst in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. He definitely showed that good snatch radius, almost not catch radius, but he went on I think it was on the 21-yard reception. A very good extension on that play.
And that was a throw where Lamar threw it to a receiver who was behind a defender, not a receiver who was in front of the defender.
Good point.
So
you're saying even though that was a quick read, it was a read where he allowed enough of that play to develop to get behind that second level in terms of that.
Yes, and he actually so there has been some narrative about Lamar's arm strength from time to time. Lamar trusted his arm strength on that throw and used it to beat, a trail defender and drop it in to a wide receiver running away from him.
Yeah. Okay. So that was the longest play of the day there. That was a 21-yarder. It was the longest single play they had of the day. I don't know if it completely
it went to Nick Boyle of all.
Yes. I don't know if it completely shuts down the narrative, but it's it's a good one. Lamar did not throw a lot of kind of low probability of success, outthrow the defender, and hopefully a player like Marquise Brown runs under it kind of throws in this game.
Or this season.
Yeah, or this season, you're right. It's been a lot of shorter stuff. It seems like a lot of his successful longer throws come on the extended plays, not on, and oftentimes when under duress, and not on the easy sit back in there in the pocket and throw it. Last year, particularly, I'm thinking back to the Miami game. He had a lot of success just throwing right out of the pocket initially in that game. Particularly I think the 47 and the 80 to Brown were both like that.
There was a deep one to Andrews where he got tackled just short of the goal line in that Miami game, and that was similar too. That was on a 5. That was empty and 5 verticals.
Empty and 5 verts. Yeah, that's unique to the Ravens really because they'll run that 5 vert play and have Lamar be his own check down.
Do you remember this offseason when either Lamar said this or his Florida quarterback coach Josh Harris said this? He said that Lamar was getting his Tom Brady on in the offseason.
I don't know what that means, but I didn't hear it, I don't think.
Well, so
this is Josh Harris said it?
Yeah. And it was talking about what kinds of things Lamar was working on this offseason. And I had at the time interpreted it to mean reading defenses, but I wonder if Lamar took it to mean like the short throws to the short, easy throws to the guys in the near parts of the field.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because part of the success of that, I think, is the Patriots are willing to stay with the same 11, and they had guys who could stand up to that kind of the legs to run a lot of short routes and tire the pass rush in particular more. The Ravens don't get to the line of scrimmage nearly quickly enough to prevent substitution, and I don't think that's going to change. I don't think that's. Not this year anyway, is Lamar going to get to the point where he's comfortable calling a play at the line of scrimmage and sugar huddling or just calling the formation with any kind of from the sideline or with his hands or whatever just to set people up. It's just that's not who he is as a quarterback right now.
Or it's not who Roman is as a play caller. Did you notice anything? I did not. I was wondering if you had this info in the second half, especially Q3. Were they snapping it faster in the play clock?
They might have been a little quicker to the line of scrimmage, but the pace element that I saw was the pace element of first read, accurate throw. I think it was more that, and there's some of it was they're throwing on first down also.
Yeah.
I mean, that pace of the offense is not completely Ravens-like.
With a play fake.
Yeah.
We were talking about yards per target. I had a second guy, the number 2 guy in yards per target for this game. Well, that would have been Boykin with his 1 catch for 11 yards, but Willie Snead, who was 4 catches on 4 targets for 37 yards. That's 9.3 yards per target. And to me, Snead has been the Ravens' most effective receiver maybe all season. He's catching, 77% of his targets. He's over 11 yards per. He had a man's game against Pittsburgh. He's really, to me, he's made a statement for a bigger role.
Yeah, I agree. He's been the Ravens' best receiver. I would agree. It's not that many total targets for him still, but the catch rate and the 11.2 yards per target will be an all-time record for the Ravens for a single season. The 11.0 by Andrews in his rookie year is the current record. It's interesting because Perriman went away from the Ravens, obviously. He's played for 3 teams the last 3 years. Josh loves to talk about it, all things Rashad Perriman. But Perriman, since he's left, has been thrown to 118 times for just over 1,200 yards. I think it's 1,204, 10.2 yards per target in his 3 years since. And 118 targets, I mean, that's more than a full season of target for any Ravens receiver. It's more like 2.
So that's way more efficient than I ever would have guessed, but he's fast. He's going deep.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it was a failed development opportunity. He was so bad in his last year in Baltimore. There was nothing but a change of scenery to be done about it. But it's really a shame that the Ravens could get nothing out of that draft pick effectively.
I mean, he was tipping balls to the defense for interceptions.
There you go.
You can't get playing time. You just can't do that.
I want to say that the passer rating throwing to him might have been 0 or very close to 0 in his last season, but it was, his yards per target were down in there in the 2 or 2.2 range. So it wasn't efficient, needless to say.
I was joking at the time that what he needs is not coaching, but a prescription for antidepressants.
Yeah, let's not go there.
Okay.
He definitely needed receiving skills and not. It wasn't anything about his tools that were wrong. It was receiving skills. He just needed time with that.
Yeah.
All right. Let's keep going here. We've got anybody else? Other skill position players you want to talk about? Anybody you want to bring up that we haven't so far?
Can I give a random sighting?
Absolutely.
Shout out to Gus Edwards for his first catches of the season. He had been 0 for.
Yeah, 0 for 4 for a running back catching the football is pretty damn terrible.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
And he had been better than that. I think he was 7 for 7 last year, which is not high usage, but that's not all incompletes either. So he caught 2, and I was really glad to see that. Nice to see him get off the schneid.
It was pointed out to me, and I didn't actually go back and check the play, that Dobbins and Edwards were on the field in a quote unquote pony backfield that was actually 2 pony receivers. So they went 5 wide on a play, but they had both of them on the field. They've done that now maybe 3 times this season, I want to say, but they had a recent touchdown run, I want to say, where Edwards was a fullback and Dobbins was the tailback. That was probably the most interesting and kind of the more reminiscent of Rice and McClain from 2008 playing together.
I have to take a moment to savor the 2 touchdown runs versus the Cowboys from that year.
Oh, there you go.
Hold on while I just think about that for a moment.
Yeah, the 2 longest runs by opponents in Texas Stadium history occurred in the last 2.5 minutes of that stadium's history.
Yeah, we're shutting it down for you, Jerry.
Yeah, there you go. Mark Andrews had kind of a bad day as a receiver. Obviously, had a terrific block on that TD run. Just fantastic, but 22 yards, 5 targets. Obviously, wasn't a good day as a receiver for him.
I mean, opponents are keying on him, right? So Indy keyed on Marquise and they keyed on Mark Andrews, which frankly every opponent should be doing.
Yeah, there you go. And maybe that, if anything, along with the scripting, which is going to have to be part of it, will force Lamar to consider other targets. And if it's those 2 are covered and then it goes to Dobbins automatically, I don't want that either. I mean, that's not using the other receiving targets. It's really got to be Duvernay, Boykin, and in this game, I think he did a good job of using Boyle, obviously, as another meaningful target.
And that's a guy who's earned trust. He's caught a lot of short balls. He's done a lot of blocking. They have some kind of communication now that's developed over the last year or so. We need it with more guys.
Yeah, those two in particular have a great rapport on broken or extended plays. And oftentimes he'll be in as a blocker with a late release that'll end up being a choice that the defender has to make to either come up and defend Lamar or cover Boyle. And they always, of course, make the go after Lamar choice. And then he had a touchdown at Buffalo on that very awkward looking shot put. And he also had a touchdown. Was he in Cincinnati? Right? Cincinnati, right? I think this year.
I think it was early in. I'm only looking at the unsuccessful pass plays, so I don't know. But I do remember this season's touchdown too.
All right. MVPs, do you want to play along with me? Do you have a three you want to name, or do you want to just talk about mine, or how'd you like to do it?
I think I've mentioned mine already, but I'll just repeat them interspersed with yours. How about?
Sure. Okay. Who's your number 3 guy?
So one was Boyle, number 2 was Snead. Well, actually, that's it.
You have 1 Boyle, 2 Snead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so I'm looking specifically at the pass receiving game, so that has to be Boyle and Snead.
Okay, fair enough. And I had Snead was my number 3 guy. My number 2 guy is Orlando Brown. I thought just the way he provided that cornerstone on the left side was awfully valuable in this game. And then Jackson is my number 1 guy. He put it together again in a good way. Didn't really come out with a great passer rating. If he'd had a touchdown, he'd have been up in the 115, 120 range, and everything would have looked great. But only 97.5 because he didn't have a touchdown, but he didn't have an interception either, and that's really important in terms of this game where the Ravens just needed to make not mistakes in that second half to pull away and win the game.
Yep.
Josh, what do we have in the mailbag?
All right, simple mailbag for you today. First one up is, now that we have seen Lamar come back and win a game, are you guys ready to give him extension and pay him? Or are you still waiting on the big game for Lamar to prove himself?
I was ready last year. I'm not waiting on anything.
Yeah, they want to just kind of time this where the terms are most favorable. And if the terms are most favorable this year, then I think it makes sense to do it this year. If we hadn't had the second half of this game and Lamar had continued to struggle game after game and had gotten into the low 90s by the end of the year in terms of a passer rating, I'd have to really be thinking about again whether I want to go to an after 3-year extension or wait another year. And so I don't think that's completely determined, but we're saved in a sense because he can't negotiate until after the 3rd year, and we have at least until the rest of the year to see what he does. So next year, if the rest of this year ends poorly and he ends up with a 93 passer rating for the year, which is a little bit below the league average now, I don't think that begs an early extension in the same way that it would be if he improves his play in the second half and gets up to 101, 102 for the year.
So I think I agree with you. I would like to try to argue with you for argument's sake here.
Sure.
So with Lamar, we're not talking only about passer rating. We're talking about his overall impact on the entire offense, which includes his own rushing numbers and the rushing holes he opens up for other players. And the Ravens just set that record with 31 straight games over 20 points and his winning percentage. So the total player is more than the passer rating to a greater degree than it is for many quarterbacks.
Absolutely true. This has not been a good FNTP year for Lamar, obviously. No. And that would be a place where I'd like to see him improve. A lot of that is don't take sacks and then really don't take big sacks. And he didn't need to take that 13-yard sack. At least I didn't think he needed to in this game. He had opportunities to get rid of the ball earlier. He had another opportunity to escape and throw it away late. But he put himself in a bad position where he ended up ultimately taking that shot and taking that sack and taking the Ravens out of field goal range.
Right.
All right. Anything else, Josh?
All right. Yeah, one more question. Gus Edwards fumbled the ball and then was given the ball for at least 2 more times at the goal line. Does this prove that the doghouse is gone?
I no, I don't think so. I think he has just some currency in the bank to use in terms of his good play with Harbaugh. I don't think the doghouse is gone.
Yeah, he had plenty of equity before that fumble. Another fumble, and then maybe that would bring the doghouse into play.
Equity, I love it. I'll use that word in the future instead of currency in the bank.
All right. Well, that does it for the mailbag. The doghouse still exists according to you guys, so we'll keep an eye on that. All right. Well, Jim, I guess we've got nothing for you to plug. Thanks for joining us. Ken, what's going on over at Filmstudy Baltimore this week?
Well, we have all the normal stuff. Defensive article is already out. The offensive line article will be out approximately the time that this podcast comes out, a little bit later on the day, hopefully on Wednesday. That'll have more detail on the scoring I just talked about here for the people who like to read an article. That's an easier way to get it. We'll have By the Numbers with Dan Reese, which we'll record on Thursday. On Wednesday, we have Know Your Foe. Great guest this week, Mark Schofield, who's a huge quarterback guru and Patriots fan, to talk about the current state of the New England Patriots.
All right. And then the new Situation Room came out on Monday, and there's also a new Section 336 out if you want to listen to a little Orioles talk, available as well.
What are you guys talking about on 336 now?
Some off-season stuff. The Orioles Rule 5 draft is in December, and the Orioles are in a weird situation that we haven't been in a long time.
With actual talent that they might lose?
Exactly. We have talent that we need to protect and decide who to protect. And that's new to the Orioles. So we discussed that. We also discussed for a while the overall state of the industry and sports entertainment and how it's changing with television contracts and what that might mean for big salary contracts and stuff in baseball, but also it's going to affect football down the road and all that eventually, as ESPN may not be around too much longer or not the way we know it.
Huh. All right.
So
that would be a monumental shift.
Jim, thanks again for being here. Always a great discussion with you. I love having you on. Appreciate you coming on and spending time with us. We'll make sure we get you on for some shorts in the off season. Maybe another game later this year if you have time for it.
I will make time for it. This is a huge pleasure for me. I love doing it.
All right, great guys. Well, we will talk again soon.